Welcome back to our new series of podcasts together with Graham Phillips, the pharmacist that gave up drugs, and we're going to be looking at the books that you should be reading, what's good out there, and what will give you the roadmap to wellness. Join us in the next few minutes whilst we chat with Graham Phillips, and of course there will be a Q&A session live on Facebook immediately after we have this discussion. Hello, Graham. Welcome back. And I believe you've got 5 books for us to take a view of. So what reading material is out there, and what's your recommendation? Is there a perfect manual to get yourself fully fit and well?
Well, no, yes and no. As you know, I think food has become a cult and almost a religion. And a lot of these books are really cultish. And if you're not in my keto cult or my low carb cult or my this cult or my that cult, you're not in my club. And I reject all of that. The whole point about prolonged longevity is personalized nutrition, and there's no single one size fits all answer. So what I've done, actually, I've pulled together a selection of different books that come at it from different perspectives. And the idea is that we synthesize the knowledge in all of them to come up with the perfect solution, not for everyone, but the perfect solution for you as an individual, which is the whole point of the Pro Longevity Project.
Okay, so what's the first book that you would like us to review?
Dan Buettner's Blue Zones. Now that's something I talk about a lot because the blue zones are 5 specific areas of the world. Everyone knows about Okinawa, that's the one that people know of the most, where men and women lead lives of equal length, which puts to bed the myth that men are genetically programmed to die sooner. Not only do men and women lead equally long lives, but people live into healthy old age at rates of 10 or even 100-fold higher than westernized industrialized societies. So your first thought might be, okay, well, they're getting lots of medication. Actually not. They're not particularly wealthy societies. And your second thought might be, oh, well, they've just got lucky genes and they're genetically designed to live longer. That's not true either. What the Blue Zones Project shows is that 90%, some people argue 90%, let's settle for 80%, of healthy longevity isn't based on genes, it's based on lifestyle. And extensive studies of these 9 areas has shown that there are sort of 9 fundamental bullet points that confer this healthy longevity. I'm going to, you die young at a very old age. And we haven't got time to go into all the detail here, but I'll just cover 2 or 3 principles I think that are pretty much universally applicable. One is that people eat seasonally. And they eat a variety of different foods. They tend to eat organically, and I've changed my view on this. I think if you can afford to eat organically, it's an investment in your health. Mm-hmm. It's what they eat, when they eat, and how they eat. So they tend to eat mindfully. They tend to eat only at certain times a day, whereas we're eating and then snacking and then eating and then snacking. They eat socially. And I think the final really important aspect of all of this, 2 more important aspects. One is how they move. So if you think from a genetic point of view, we're somewhere between 1 million and 2 million years old. So we're essentially cavemen living in a space age. Now, I don't know about you, John, but I'm not likely to be wandering up the high street anytime soon carrying my spear. But what's the kind of modern day equivalent? Well, it might be the movement of a postman, or maybe the movement of a waitress. And you'll notice that I'm talking to you standing up, because what we found is long periods of sitting are just as dangerous as smoking. So being mobile all the time is really important. In fact, my watch reminds me, if I haven't been moving for an hour, with all the Zooms that we're all sitting in, that's become worse, hasn't it? That you move. And then intensity of exercise. So the kind of movement that a postman makes, the kind of movement that a waitress makes, and every so often the 200-meter hurdle. So intensity of exercise. And then it's about sleep and stress and being able to deal with all of those things as well. it seems that with the COVID pandemic, no one's moving, but everyone's a lot more stressed, and we've got too much screen time. So there are sort of fundamental principles in there which you can synthesize, and the evidence is that you follow these 9 precepts, it will add 10 or 12 vital, healthy years to your life.
Did the precepts that it offers actually adapt to modern city life? Because you've got these blue zones, but I wouldn't say they're necessarily in an idyllic setting, but they might be more in a village setting where you've got all of those facilities to live at a different pace and do things like social meals.
No, you're quite right. You can't simply live in a blue zone bubble. And so what we've done is we've taken aspects of it. And, my life isn't lived in a blue zone. I'm locked in. I'm suffering from locked in syndrome like everybody else. But just for example, buying a standing desk, that's not a problem. Just for example, when I take business calls, standing up and taking my business calls. Just for example, when I have meetings with my team, increasingly our meetings are held up standing up. There's a lot more energy in the room and the meetings are a lot quicker. That kind of thing is reasonable to adapt. Most of us could afford at least some organic food. And with the Pro-Longevity Project, of course, people generally aren't hungry and eat a lot less. So I kind of say, well, eat half as much food, but invest in twice as healthy food. So there are many aspects of it that we can emulate and adopt. Maybe not 100%, but we can synthesize a lot of the learning and adapt and adopt maybe 80 or 90% of it into a modern lifestyle. And it fits in. It has to. My life is the same as yours. I'm busy and under pressure, but I've managed to adopt enough of this to get a benefit.
Okay. So let's take a look at book number 2. What have you got in your selection?
Another of my heroes, Valter Longo.
Okay, could you just give us some background on these authors, just so that people know their credentials?
In the case of Dan Buettner, he's got the most fantastic TED Talk. So if you just Google Dan Buettner TED Talk Blue Zones, it might save your life and it might take you 12 minutes. So highly recommend it. Excellent. It brings together, the whole point is that when you start to synthesize all this information, you're going to need to triangulate a variety of different things, because life isn't a clinical trial. And the problem with the clinical trials is they're applied to a limited number of people in very specified, very controlled circumstances. Yeah. And we're not leading our lives in clinical trials. And there's never going to be a clinical trial for food.
Sure.
It's too complicated. So what you have to do in order to establish what's healthy is one of the things you can do is look at really healthy populations like the blue zones and see what is it that confers the healthy longevity.
Yeah.
Right. And that is what Dan Buettner has done. He's looked at the lifestyle and the diet, etc., and the attitude and the socialization, and that tells us something, right? Yeah. But then you've got to say, okay, does the clinical picture and the science fit? And that brings in Valter Longo.
Okay.
Now, Valter's a gerontologist, and his theory is this, that in westernized industrialized societies, what we try and do is kill disease, right? So we don't really focus on longevity. We just focus on stop the diabetes with a tablet, stop the hypertension with a tablet, treat the cancer with a tablet. And according to Valter, if you were overnight abolished all these diseases, you might think that everyone would live to 120. No, what Valter says is if you ignore longevity, actually you'd get 3 to 4 years benefit. And actually, one of my other big heroes, Asim Malhotra, who we've had on the podcast, that's what he says. He says all this investment in healthcare and we're getting about 3 years of poor quality life. We're not really extending healthy life. We're just living longer, but not in a particularly good way. What Valter's done with his book and with his, again, he's very scientific, he triangulates a lot, so he's got about 15, I think, major clinical trials going on, is that if you there's a principle called hormesis, and hormesis, to put it in simple terms, is what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And there are various forms of hormesis, one of which is fasting. And what Valter's shown is that if you fast for 5 days, you get huge amounts of benefits. It kind of switches on your sirtuins, your longevity genes. It dials down your insulin, your blood pressure drops. It's a healthy thing to do. but most of us can't actually sustain it, right? Most of us struggle to not eat with it to the next snack, right? It's just like the guy who said, I quit smoking between cigarettes, and we're fasting between meals and snacks.
Mm.
And of course, when I get people onto the longevity program, we gradually extend the periods of not eating. He's got something called the fasting mimicking diet. And what he's been able to show that is that by following his fasting mimicking diet, it's a program called Prolon, Prolon, and we are actually stockists of Prolon. You don't actually have to fast. You just eat this very specific meals over 5 days, and it gives you the benefit of fasting without actually fasting. So that's a kind of, this is PhD's worth of information that I'm trying to go through in 10 minutes. So you have to accept the limitations, but he's very based in the science. And he's managed to triangulate all these different aspects of the science, the clinical picture, the science, the measurements, what goes on in the blue zone. So it kind of builds up the picture of, I'm pretty confident about where we're going with this.
Yeah, so it seems like to write one of these books, you've got to have an ology, and you'd be an epidemiologist or a gerontologist. So they're rather like, if I was to treat this as an analogy and my body was a car, you've got like an electronics expert, somebody who knows suspension, and another person that might know engine management. But it's piecing together the best experts for the whole performance management of your body vehicle.
I think you're absolutely right with that, John. One of my other heroes, Peter Attia, very technical guy, absolute genius. And he always says that if the only tool you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And I think that's what happens. People get, particularly in healthcare now, you've got a specialist who does the upper eyelid and another specialist who does the lower eyelid.
That's it.
They're brilliant at the eyelids, but ask them beyond that, they don't know. And so I think what me as a kind of generalist I try to do is delve deep into the experts, but also can keep a balance.
Right. So next expert that you would recommend people delve into?
Matthew Walker.
Right. Why? About him.
So Matthew is one of the probably two world's leading sleep scientists. If you only follow two people on sleep, he's number one, and the other one is Satchin Panda. And Satchin is all about algorithms and the sort of daily rhythms that we have. The thing about Matthew, apart from being a brilliant scientist, he's a fantastic communicator. Again, Matthew's got a wonderful TED talk that I highly recommend. And at the start of the book, Matthew talks about this experiment that goes on every year. And 1.5 billion people each year do this experiment. And the result of this experiment every year is a 20% increase in heart attacks, road traffic accidents, and one or two other things, right? Which we carry on doing year after year after year. And the experiment is when we move the clocks forward and back.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So we're all chronically short of sleep. And I focus a lot on sleep, as you know, when we've spoken previously. And what the evidence shows is, when we put the clocks back each year, by that 1 hour, the 23% increase in heart attacks, strokes, suicides, road traffic accidents. And when we put the clocks forward, or whichever way around it is, and we all gain an extra an hour 6 months later, most of that statistic reverses itself, cause and effect.
It's a bit worrying though, if you're a patient and you go to an NHS hospital and you've got everybody on shifts messing around with their body clocks. I'm sure that has an effect.
The World Health Organization has actually classified shift work as a carcinogen. That is how profound the effect is. Right? Not only do we sleep in our bodies, not only do our individual cells sleep, but individual organelles, individual parts of our cells sleep. And to give you another example, which I think is quite profound, you know that whales are mammals and they're very highly intelligent. Some whales have been shown to live to 500 years old. But because they're mammals, they have to come up for air. So if they fell asleep at the bottom of the ocean, they drown. So they sleep with one side of their brain and then the other. So sleep is absolutely of fundamental importance. Again, PhD's worth. I could talk for hours, but as I say, Matthew Walker's book is fantastic. There's lots of him on YouTube. He's got an excellent blog, and I've learned loads from him.
Okay. What's your favourite book?
My hero, Ivor Cummins.
Ah,
And
no.
I always say to people, I read all the bloody books. If you only read one book, this is the one. Eat rich, live long.
Okay. A lot of people might not have heard of Ivor Cummins. So, and I know you just recently did a podcast with him, but let people know a little bit about his credentials.
Fascinating because we were discussing, we are about to release a podcast with him. Like me, he had a health journey. Unlike me, he's an engineer, not a health professional, which is a disadvantage in terms of his knowledge, but a huge advantage because he comes at it with a very analytical mind, but he's not part of any cult.
Hmm.
And we were both agreed that health professionals have almost no training in sleep or nutrition or exercise. What we're trained in is the identification of symptoms and the suppression of the symptoms with drugs. So he had some out of whack blood tests. He went to see his GP and he didn't really think the answers the GP were giving were very satisfactory. So then he went to see a consultant and even then a super consultant, and none of them could answer his questions, why his bloods were so strange. So he spent 3 weeks engaging with PubMed and digging into himself and came up with answers. And within another 8 weeks, he'd basically sorted himself out. His cholesterol was back under control, his weight came down, and his kind of journey is very similar to mine. And we kind of discovered each other really by serendipity. He's got an incredible YouTube. He's got a fantastic blog, and he's written this with Jeff Gerber. So it's written by an engineer and by a medical doctor. And unlike a lot of these people where they write a book and then they rewrite the book, basically the same book in a slightly different cover and again, how much time the two, they've just released the second edition of it. It is full of science. You can rely on it absolutely because he's dug deep into literature. But you don't necessarily have to read it in one go. In fact, I wouldn't recommend trying to read it in one go. But you can rely on this guy because he's done so much research and he's so much based in the evidence. He's synthesized it for you. He's explained what the background is, what you should do, how you modulate it, and at the end, there's lots of recipes as well. So if you can only afford one book, Ivor's book is the one book. And no, he didn't pay me to say that.
Okay, so the final book I know a little bit about because on my own journey on pro longevity, I did some Amazon book shopping and came up with a book, and I said, "This is brilliant, Graham. Have you ever come across it?" And I think you know about the author and the one of the doctors recommending it.
Yeah, Katie and Giancarlo Caldesi, and Giancarlo's become a bit of a friend, really. So he's a lovely, charismatic guy, a highly successful chef with two restaurants in fancy places. I think one in Mayfair and the other one in a very fancy part of Berkshire, Marlow or somewhere like that. And of course, he loves his food and he loves his booze. And he ended up with diabetes, and he ended up with all the side effects, and he ended up with peripheral neuropathy. His feet were going bad, he was getting tingles and so on and so forth. And he discovered, like I did, the public health collaboration. I shamelessly plug the charity called the Public Health Collaboration because it's exactly what it says on the tin. It's a national and an international collaboration of patients, scientists, health professionals who want to change things. And he's got, if you go to the Public Health Collaboration website, maybe we can link to that in the show notes. There's a wonderful presentation by Giancarlo, and he talks about his own health journey. And he's now so convinced of the need to be healthy, low carb, avoid the seed oils, all the things that I talk about, that he and Katie do regular cooking demonstrations, and they've come out with a couple of cookbooks. And I've recommended this one to so many of my clients, I think including you. Yeah. I've never had anything but really positive feedbacks. People enjoy the recipes, they don't feel deprived, the recipes work, and you know that you're healthy.
Yeah, I can second that. I think the importance of that book is that when you go on to a journey with pro longevity, it's not about denial. It's actually opening up a whole new way of enjoying food, different types of food. It should be seen as an adventure, and I think that book gives you some fantastic, colourful dishes, tasty dishes that show you don't need lots of sugar and lots of carbohydrates to enjoy the best of life. I think you had an expression, "Eat the rainbow," and that's very much part of it, isn't it?
Yeah. So the kind of standard Western diet is very high in calories and very low in micronutrients. Well, of course, if we were burning all the calories up, that'd be one thing. But because the body keeps on craving the micronutrients, if you kind of think, if you need if a meal's only got half the micronutrients that you really need, then your body carries on craving them. So then you eat twice as many calories to get the nutrients. Well, of course, most of us are eating lots of empty calories, almost devoid of nutrition. And so I kind of think, if you think of a pyramid, it's like that when it should be like that. So the bit at the top should be the calories, and the bit at the bottom should be the micronutrients. But we're not. We're eating the other way around, and we're eating a diet that's completely unsuited to, our diet has changed so radically, particularly since the introduction of hyper-processed, ultra-processed foods, which are being conned by the food industry to be healthy when it's exactly the reverse of healthy. And they want us to believe that because that's where their profit comes from. They make far more money selling us this ultra-processed, breakfast crap, anything that says Kellogg's or Nestle on it, rather than eating, real meat and broccoli and all the things we're designed to eat. So we've got to undo these diet myths and go back to eating real food.
Brilliant. Okay, so just to wrap up now then, for anybody that's watching this for the first time, Graham is an award-winning pharmacist. He's won 2 major awards recently. You can find a lot more information on prolongevity.co.uk. There is also a private members Facebook group with all the brilliant podcasts and debates. So please try and join that as well. We try and put this out in lots of formats. There's a podcast version, there's a YouTube version. So wherever you are, click and follow if you can. Graham is about to transform and change his shirt and go live for discussion and debate. So if you've got a book that you're particularly passionate about, why not suggest it? Or any questions about some of the different ologists that we have studied this evening. So from myself, I'm going to hand over to Graham. Bye for now. Look forward to seeing you again in our next podcast.
Good to see you, John. Take care.
Thanks for listening, and please do share and subscribe to all our podcasts to hear more about Graham and his many years of success in helping people to rapidly overcome life-threatening and debilitating conditions with simple, drug-free lifestyle changes. Visit www.prolongevity.co.uk or join our Facebook and LinkedIn groups. There you'll find daily updates and tips on the science and safe, scientifically proven ways to reduce the risk of serious ill health from common killer diseases such as type 2 diabetes, coronary heart disease and cancers. Now, if you're watching this live as part of our Facebook Live, stay with us for Q&A on today's topics with Graham Phillips. Over to you, Graham.